2,493 white walls. Not long before that, Morgan heard the door lock after the psychiatrist left the room. Some time later, the door opened again, and a nurse walked in, accompanied by 3 burly orderlies. Morgan did not move, continuing to look out the window. She was seated in a wheelchair, her arms bound by a straitjacket, which wasn't that uncomfortable. What really drove her mad was that she was not allowed to shower without supervision, and the hospital staff was too afraid of her to wash her properly. Not that she would allow anyone to touch her. Her personal hygiene situation was sorrowful. Outside the window, the world was dark and veiled by rain. Distant spotlights were shining through the torrents of falling water on the dam that towered above the city like a great barrier. The sight of this illusory world was strange and wondrous. Morgan was not taking in the darkly stunning landscape, though. She was tracking the movements of the 4 people who had entered her room in the reflections on the surface of the window. The orderlies locked the door and took positions around her, while the nurse brightened the lights and went about preparing an injection. She filled a disposable syringe with a transparent liquid from a medical ampule, then flicked it a few times and pressed the plunger lightly to let out the tiny bubbles of air. "Miss Morgan, I will administer your medicine now." Her tone was pleasant and polite. Morgan did not turn her way, continuing to face the window. She did speak, however. How strange. The nurse gave her a confused look. Most of her face was obscured by a mask, but there was definitely a silent question in her eyes. "Strange. What do you mean?" Morgan sighed. "You are not afraid of me." She finally turned her head, looking at the nurse calmly. "Anyone on the hospital staff would be at least a little wary. You must be new. Come to think of it, I don't recognize any of you." The nurse chuckled in a friendly manner. "Oh, yes. There are a lot of recent hires in the hospital these days, Miss Morgan. Now, if you allow me." Morgan smiled faintly. "Oh, but you see, not only do I not recognize you, but I am also not scheduled to receive any injections at this time. And on top of that," she looked at the syringe the nurse was holding in her hand. "The medication I've been receiving has a yellow tint. This one is entirely transparent, though. So, a nurse I don't recognize wants to inject me with a substance I don't know, at the wrong hour, no less. How peculiar, don't you think?" The nurse remained silent for a while, looking at her kindly. Then, kindness slowly drained from her eyes. Giving one of the orderlies a cold stare, she said in a harsh tone. "Hold her tightly. Ah, but make sure not to leave any bruises, it has to look natural, you know." Amusing. The orderlies stepped forward to hold Morgan down. Their ROA hands landed on her neck and her shoulders, pressing her into the wheelchair and making it impossible for her to move. The nurse took a step in their direction, preparing the syringe. Morgan laughed. 4 entire people to handle one poor me. Well, I guess I'm worth it. I am Morgan of Valor, after all. Even if Valor doesn't exist anymore." Her laughter stopped abruptly, and she pierced the nurse with a gaze so cold that it made the woman stumble. "You made a mistake, though. Do you know what your mistake is?" Morgan's hands moved under the white fabric of the straitjacket, as if she was turning her wrists. A derisive smile twisted her scarlet lips. "Thinking that just 4 will be enough." The nurse had regained her composure by then. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice gained a mocking undertone. "Don't mind her. What can she even?" Then, there was the sound of tearing fabric, and Morgan's 10 fingers easily pierced the straitjacket. She pulled her hands down, and the tough fabric parted easily, as if cut by 10 razor-sharp knives. "I suggest you run." But, of course, the 3 muscular orderlies holding her down and the nurse carrying a syringe full of an unidentified substance did not listen to her advice. The patient room had padded walls. It was quite soundproof when it needed to be. When the screams died out, Morgan exhaled slowly and looked up, at the white ceiling of the sterile room that had served as her prison cell for the past few months. The ceiling was painted red with chaotic splatters now. The soft padding on the floor was slowly absorbing vast puddles of blood. The walls were torn apart and dripping crimson. There was barely any white left in the room. Pulling off the pitiful remains of her straitjacket, Morgan turned to the only corner that remained free of the blood. There, the supposed nurse was pressing herself against the soft walls, shivering as she looked up at Morgan with horror. Monster, monster, you are." Quote. Dropping the torn straitjacket to the floor, Morgan walked over to the shaking woman and crouched near her. "Hey, you." She picked up the abandoned syringe from the floor and looked at the nurse impassively. "Do you know why I left you for last?" The woman tried to press herself even deeper into the wall, shaking her head in terror. Morgan smiled. "It's because I wanted to. Keep your uniform clean. Sometime later, the lights in the patient room went out. The door opened, and a woman in blue scrubs walked out into the corridor. Her face was covered by a mask, and her black hair was gathered in a tidy bun. She looked perfectly unassuming, just like any other nurse in the private wing of the psychiatric hospital. The door locked behind her with an audible click. As the woman headed away with confident steps, a passing doctor gave her a stare, and then asked in a confused tone. "Huh, did you just walk out of that room?" The woman lowered her eyes and responded politely. "Yes. Please keep your voice down, doctor, Miss Morgan is asleep." He studied her silently for a few moments. Then chuckled. "You went there alone, brave girl." Shaking his head and chuckling, the doctor walked away, leaving the woman alone. She did not linger, either, and soon, no one was left in front of the locked door in its dark window. 2494 escaped lunatic. Morgan made her way through the hospital without being discovered by anyone. Nobody paid her much attention. When they did, she greeted them in a polite tone and calmly walked past, pretending to be busy running an errand. At some point, though, she had to spend 5 minutes chatting with an especially outgoing staff member. The man did not suspect anything and left the conversation with a pleasant impression of the polite newbie, having given the rookie several pieces of priceless advice. Morgan used the ID card of the woman she had killed in her patient room to unlock the door to the common area of the hospital, nodded at the security guard stationed there while hiding the blood-stained ID card in her pocket, and headed for the lobby. A few minutes later, she opened the door and felt the rustling of the rain envelop her. The smell of fresh air was sweet. Before she could step outside, however, she saw someone familiar right in front of her. It was the Lord of Shadows, in all his rugged glory, dragging her astonishingly beautiful psychiatrist behind him. The taciturn woman had a bloodied handkerchief wrapped around her hand. Not showing any reaction, Morgan bowed politely and held the door for them. Her heartbeat stayed steady as the pair walked past her. Once they entered the lobby, she took a step forward. But then, stop, damn it. Morgan lingered for a moment, then turned around and looked at the Lord of Shadows coldly. "Where are you going, I wonder?" She studied him silently, evaluating the situation. Usually, she would have stood no chance against a sovereign. But they were all equal here, in Mirage City. Some were more equal than others were, though. For all intents and purposes, everyone here seemed to be perfectly mundane, with one important exception. Their flaws were still binding them like chains. In the case of Morgan, her flaw made it so that everything she touched was cut. That cruel curse had cast a lonesome shadow over most of her adult life, but here in Mirage City, it was suddenly an advantage. Morgan was pretty sure that he could kill the Lord of Shadows and his stunning companion, if it came to that. She remained silent for a moment, and then smiled darkly beneath the mask. "How's my little sister doing? You're treating her right." He looked at her with an unhappy expression. "Would you quit calling her your sister? It's weird. And for the record, yes, she's doing great. I try." Quote. Morgan felt the deep groovs forming on the handle of the door under her fingers. So, he did find Athena, after all. And for the record, yes, she's doing great. I try. Saint stared at Detective Sunless, who in turn stared at the nurse, at Morgan, the heiress of the Valor Group, who was somehow out of the patient ward and free of her straitjacket. Strangely enough, she did not seem particularly violent or unhinged, sharp and dangerous, maybe, but perfectly in control of her thoughts and actions. Her eyes were also of an impossible scarlet color now, apparently. And, her sister was dating Detective Sunless. Saint would have been pleased for her patient and happy that he was building positive relationships, if not for the fact that it was impossible. Not only because there was only one daughter in the Valor family, but also because he had been full of loathing and fixated on persecuting Morgan's brother as the culprit in the nihilist killings for many months. What are they talking about? Saint was utterly confused. Morgan, meanwhile, let go of the door and took a step back. "See you later, then. Oh, by the way, can I borrow an umbrella?" Detective Sunless threw a sideways glance at the security guards. His gaze seemed tense, for some reason. Saint realized then that it was eerily quiet in the lobby of the hospital. Everyone, the guards, the staff members, the volunteers fortifying the building against potential floods, had grown motionless at some point, and were all staring at them with strangely emotionless, glassy eyes. She could not help but shiver. Detective Sunless smiled crookedly. "You can, but I'll do you one better. I have a PTV. Want a ride?" Why is he offering an escaping mental patient a ride? Morgan hesitated for a few moments, then shrugged. "Sure, Why not? Lead the way. Saint opened her eyes wide. Why is she agreeing? Still confused, she found herself following Detective Sunless and Morgan of the Valor family through the rain. Their steps were hurried, and they were looking around with wary gazes. Their wariness transferred to Saint, as well. It was hard to see because of the rain, and the parking lot was desolate and empty. Any number of people could be hiding in the darkness, so reaching the detective's car, his car. Saint frowned. The corpses of the 3 assailants were still on the road, and when Morgan saw them, her reaction was bound to be extreme. A fragile person like her could not be exposed to such traumatic stimuli. But before Saint could do anything, they reached the car. The corpses were still, sprawled on the road, being battered by rain. The rain washed away the blood, but it was impossible to mistake the ghastly nature of the 3 dark shapes laying on the asphalt for anything but what they were. Oh, no, Saint looked at Morgan, concerned. Morgan, meanwhile, looked at the corpses with complete indifference. A moment later, though, she smiled. 3, were these guys after the psychiatrist? Detective Sunless nodded, making Morgan's smile widen a little. She gave the ghastly corpses another nonchalant glance. They sent 4 after me. Then, she looked at the detective and asked curiously, "What about you?" He lingered with the answer for a while. "A seasoned, elite assassin. Not rabble like these fools were." Morgan studied him silently for a moment. "So, 1. Detective Sunless scowled fiercely. He was the real deal, okay. Mumbling something under his nose, he dragged the most gruesome corpse to the wayside, then walked back to the car and opened the door. "Now, are you getting in or what?" Shrugging, Morgan took off her face mask and climbed onto the backseat. "I probably should not get into that car." Saint hesitated for a few moments. And then got into the car. "Damn it,